The silence in my apartment had a texture. It was a smooth, worn-in thing, like the old velvet armchair in the corner that I never sat in but couldn't bring myself to throw away. For 3 years, that silence had been my most constant companion, a quiet hum beneath the click of my keyboard and the soft scratch of my stylus on the tablet. I had curated my life into a state of placid isolation, a carefully constructed fortress against the noise of the world, and most especially, against the noise of my own wanting. I told myself I was content. I told myself it was peace. It was a lie, of course, but a comfortable one. Then Julian called. His voice on the phone was a wrecking ball to my quiet little life. It was frayed, laced with a static I had not heard since that disastrous final exam week in our senior year of college. Leo? Hey man, you busy? I was never busy. Not really. I was working on a branding package for a new artisanal pickle company, but that was just a task, not a state of being. Not really. What's up? You sound rough. A humorless laugh crackled through the speaker. Rough is one word for it. Look, this is a massive ask, and you should feel zero guilt saying no, but I'm in a bit of a bind. A huge bind, actually. My stomach tightened. Julian didn't ask for help. He was the one who gave it, who fixed things, who always landed on his feet with a cocky grin and a story to tell. He was the sun, and I had long ago resigned myself to being a planet in his orbit, content to observe his light from a safe, predictable distance. What kind of bind? I asked, my voice betraying a tremor of concern I could not suppress. Got laid off. Same day my landlord sold the building and the new owners are booting everyone for renovations. I have 30 days to be out, my severance won't kick in for 2 weeks, and my bank account is looking anemic. He paused, and the silence that followed was heavy, jagged. Not my comfortable, smooth silence, but one filled with unspoken panic. I just need a couch for a few weeks. A month max. Just until I get on my feet. I'll be a ghost, you won't even know I'm there. A ghost. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I had spent the last 5 years trying to exorcise the ghost of him from my thoughts, from the memory of late-night study sessions where his knee would brush against mine, sending a jolt through my entire system that I would spend hours overanalyzing. My carefully constructed piece was a fortress made of glass, and Julian was a stone. Yeah, I heard myself say, the word feeling foreign and reckless. Yeah, of course. The relief in his exhale was a physical force, traveling through the phone and pushing the air from my own lungs. Leo, man, thank you. I owe you. Big time. Don't worry about it, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. It's what friends are for. Friends. The word felt like a lie even as I said it. He moved in on a rainy Saturday. The day was gray and miserable, a perfect reflection of my internal state of anxious turmoil. I watched from the window as he pulled up in his beaten-up pickup truck, the bed loaded with a haphazard collection of boxes and black garbage bags. He moved with a familiar, restless energy, even in the downpour. He vaulted over the side of the truck bed, his jeans soaked through, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He was still the same Julian, all sharp angles and contained power, a coiled spring of a man. I opened the door before he could knock. He stood on my welcome mat, dripping onto the hardwood floor I had polished just that morning. He offered a sheepish, tired smile, and it did something catastrophic to my composure. It wasn't his usual confident grin. This one was smaller, more vulnerable. It reached his eyes, which were a deep, weary shade of hazel. Hey, he said, his voice low and a little rough. Sorry about the mess. It's just water. I stepped back to let him in. He brought the first box inside, and with it, his scent. It was a mix of rain, damp denim, and that faint, spicy smell of his cologne that I remembered with a startling, unwelcome clarity. It was the scent of my own private undoing. My small, tidy apartment, a space that was an extension of my own contained self, was suddenly invaded. He filled it. His presence was bigger than the box he carried. It changed the very quality of the air, charging it with a kinetic energy that my quiet life lacked. I helped him carry the rest of his things in. It was not much. A few boxes of clothes, a duffel bag, a well-worn guitar case, and a box that smelled faintly of oil paints and turpentine. He had always been the artist, the one who saw the world in colors and textures I could only dream of. I designed logos. he created worlds on canvas. As we set the last box down in the living room, which was now also his bedroom, our hands brushed. It was nothing, a fleeting contact of skin. But for me, it was an electric shock. I pulled my hand back as if burned. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he gave no sign. He was too busy surveying the space, his gaze taking in my minimalist furniture, the neat stacks of books, the single, abstract print on the wall. "You keep a clean place, Leo," he said, a hint of his old teasing tone returning. "I'll try not to mess it up too much with my existential chaos." I managed a small smile. "Just keep the chaos contained to your corner." He looked over at me, his gaze lingering for a second too long. It was an intense, appraising look that made me feel entirely transparent. He had always had a way of looking at people as if he were sketching them in his mind, figuring out their lines and shadows. "Deal?" he said, and the single word held a weight it should not have. That night, I lay in my bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person breathing in my home. The silence was gone, replaced by the soft rustle of a sleeping bag, the occasional sigh. My fortress had been breached. The ghost was no longer a ghost. He was flesh and blood and sleeping on my floor, and I knew, with a certainty that felt like a cold dread, that my comfortable, lonely life was over. The thought was both terrifying and, to my shame, thrilling. The first week was an exercise in awkward navigation. We were two celestial bodies that had been thrown into a new, uncomfortably close orbit, struggling to avoid collision. I worked from my small office nook, and he spent his days on my couch, laptop balanced on his knees, firing off job applications into the digital void. The sound of his typing became a new part of my daily soundscape, a counter-rhythm to my own. I became a student of his presence, an obsessive observer of his habits. I learned that he hummed when he was concentrating, a low, tuneless sound that vibrated through the floorboards. I learned that he drank his coffee black, and that he had a habit of running a hand through his already messy hair when he was frustrated, leaving it sticking up in chaotic tufts. I learned the exact cadence of his footsteps, the way the floor creaked differently under his weight than it did under mine. My focus, once a laser beam I could direct at a project for hours, was now fractured. I would find myself staring at the back of his head, at the strong column of his neck, at the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached for his coffee mug. I would catch myself listening to his phone calls, trying to decipher the tone of his conversations with potential employers, feeling a vicarious sting of rejection when he would hang up with a heavy sigh. This constant proximity was a unique form of torture. It was like being starved and forced to sit at a banquet, forbidden to eat. Every casual interaction was fraught with a hidden meaning that only I could perceive. When he handed me a beer one evening, his fingers brushed against mine. I spent the next hour replaying the moment in my mind, analyzing the warmth of his skin, the fleeting pressure. It was just a touch. It meant nothing. It meant everything. "You're quiet," he said one afternoon, looking up from his laptop. His eyes, which I had determined were more green than brown in the afternoon light, were fixed on me. "You always were, but this is next level." I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I was being watched by the man I was constantly watching. Just focused. I lied, turning back to my screen, where the logo for the pickle company had been languishing for an hour. "Right. Pickles." He got up and stretched, his arms reaching for the ceiling. His shirt rode up, exposing a tantalizing strip of tanned skin and the sharp line of his hip bone. My breath hitched. I forced my eyes back to my monitor, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I'm going crazy cooped up in here," he announced. "Need to move. Want to go for a walk?" My first instinct was to say no. A walk meant more proximity, more chances for accidental touches, more time under his perceptive gaze. It was safer here, with our designated zones and the buffer of our screens. "Okay," I said, betraying myself once again. We walked to the park a few blocks away. The awkwardness of the apartment dissipated slightly in the open air. Julian walked with a long, easy stride, his hands shoved in his pockets. I had to walk a little faster than usual to keep up. "Sorry about this," he said suddenly, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "Invading your space like this. It's a lot." "It's fine, Julian." "Really? No, it's not. I know you. You like your space. You're quiet." He glanced at me, and that searching look was back. "I feel like I'm a hurricane in your Zen garden." I couldn't help a small laugh. My Zen garden was getting a little boring. His answering smile was genuine, and it lit up his whole face. For a moment, he looked like the carefree college kid I had fallen for. The one who could talk me into skipping class to go to the art museum or convince me that a 2 a.m. road trip for tacos was a brilliant idea. Well, I'm good at messing things up, he said, his smile fading slightly. Seems to be my specialty lately. You'll find something, I said, the words feeling inadequate. You're talented. You. He stopped walking and turned to face me. What's that supposed to mean? I faltered, my courage deserting me. Just that. You always figure things out. He held my gaze for a long moment, and I felt that familiar, dizzying sensation of being seen, of being truly looked at. I felt like a book he was reading, my secrets written in plain language on my face. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if confirming something to himself. Then he started walking again, and the moment was over. But it lingered in the air between us, a new, unspoken thing. The days bled into weeks. Julian started picking up odd jobs, a little construction work for a friend's dad, painting a neighbor's garage, helping a catering company on weekends. He would come home late, tired and splattered with paint or smelling of sawdust. He was always apologetic about tracking dirt into the apartment, but I found I did not mind. The signs of his life, his work, were a welcome disruption to my sterile environment. They made the place feel more lived in, more like a home. One evening, he came back with a deep gash on his forearm, wrapped in a greasy paper towel. What happened? I asked, jumping up from my desk. Piece of scrap metal, he said with a grimace, peeling back the paper towel to reveal an angry red wound. It's fine. It is not fine. It needs to be cleaned. Sit. I pointed to a kitchen chair, my voice firmer than I intended. To my surprise, he obeyed without argument, sinking into the chair and looking up at me with an expression of weary trust. I retrieved my first aid kit from the bathroom. My hands were steady as I cleaned the cut with an antiseptic wipe, but my insides were a chaotic mess. His arm was solid and warm under my fingers. I could feel the tension in his muscles, see the fine, dark hairs on his skin. He was so close, close enough for me to count the faint freckles across the bridge of his nose, to see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. He watched my face as I worked, his own expression unreadable. You'd have made a good nurse, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate right through my hands. I'm just good at following instructions on a box, I deflected, my focus narrowing to the task of applying a sterile bandage. My fingers trembled slightly as I smoothed the adhesive edges against his skin. I could feel his pulse, a steady, strong beat beneath my thumb. I was so hyper-aware of him, of every minute detail. The way his breath smelled of coffee, the small, white scar just above his eyebrow, the way he held himself perfectly still, as if he were afraid a sudden movement might scare me away. When I was finished, I pulled back, but my hand lingered in the air for a moment too long. His gaze flickered from my face down to my hand, and then back up again. The air between us was thick, charged with all the things we were not saying. He did not say thank you. He just kept looking at me, and in that look, I saw something I had never allowed myself to hope for. I saw a flicker of the same desperate wanting that lived inside of me. Or maybe I was just projecting. Maybe I was just seeing what I so desperately wanted to see. He cleared his throat and looked away, breaking the spell. I should probably shower, he said, standing up. I'm covered in grime. Yeah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Good idea. He retreated to the bathroom, and I was left standing in the kitchen, my heart pounding, the ghost of his warmth still on my fingertips. The silence he left behind was different now. It was not empty. It was full of questions. The dynamic between us had shifted. The awkwardness had not disappeared entirely, but it was now overlaid with a new, thrumming tension. The accidental touches became less accidental. A hand on the small of my back as he squeezed past me in the narrow hallway. His knee pressing against mine on the couch as we watched a movie, staying there long after the initial contact. Each touch was a question, and my lack of response, my stillness, was an answer. I lived in a state of heightened sensory awareness. I was constantly cataloging the scent of him on the towels in the bathroom, the sound of his low laugh when he was on the phone with his sister, the sight of him asleep on the couch, his face soft and unguarded in the pre-dawn light. My internal monologue was a relentless cycle of analysis and second-guessing. He held my gaze for 37 seconds this morning. That's longer than usual. What does it mean? He called me Leo in that specific tone of voice, the soft one. Is he just being nice because he's grateful, or is it more? I was going insane. It was a sweet, agonizing madness. One Friday night, a month into his stay, the power went out. One moment, the apartment was filled with the glow of the television and the hum of the refrigerator. The next, we were plunged into an abrupt, profound darkness and silence. Well, damn. Julian's voice came from the couch. Breaker must have tripped, I said, already moving towards the hallway closet where I kept a flashlight. My hand fumbled along the wall, my usual confident navigation of my own space rendered useless. Careful, he said, and then his hand was on my arm, warm and steady, stopping me. Don't want you breaking your neck in the Zen garden. His touch sent a familiar jolt through me. I know where the flashlight is, I said, my voice sounding breathless to my own ears. Let me, he said. I could feel him move past me, his body brushing against mine in the dark. The darkness made everything more intimate, more intense. I could hear his soft breathing, smell the faint scent of soap from his earlier shower. He found the flashlight and switched it on, its powerful beam cutting a sharp cone through the blackness. The breaker box showed no issues. A quick look out the window confirmed our suspicion. The entire block was dark. A transformer had blown somewhere down the street. Looks like we're roughing it, Julian said, his face illuminated from below by the flashlight's beam, casting dramatic shadows on his features. He looked like a man telling a ghost story around a campfire. I have candles, I said, remembering the box of emergency supplies under the sink. We spent the next 10 minutes turning my apartment into a flickering sanctuary. We lit candles and placed them around the living room, their soft, dancing light creating a warm, intimate atmosphere that our usual harsh electric lighting never could. The shadows stretched and swayed, making the small space feel both larger and more enclosed, like our own private cave. Now what? I asked, sitting on the floor and leaning against the couch. Julian sat down across from me, cross-legged, the guitar case that had been leaning in the corner now resting beside him. Now, he said, unlatching the case, we entertain ourselves. He pulled out his old acoustic guitar. It was a beautiful, battered thing, covered in scratches and dings, each one no doubt holding a story. He tuned it by ear, his head cocked to the side, his expression one of deep concentration. And then he started to play. He was not a flashy player. He did not sing. He just played, his fingers moving over the frets with an easy, familiar grace. He played simple, melancholic melodies that seemed to fill up all the dark corners of the room. The music was sad and beautiful, and it felt like he was telling me all the things he could not say with words. He was playing his frustration, his uncertainty, his fatigue. I watched him mesmerized. The candlelight softened the sharp lines of his face, making him look younger, more vulnerable. His eyes were closed, his long lashes dark against his skin. He was completely lost in the music, and in that moment, I felt like I was seeing the truest version of him. Not the cocky, confident Julian, but the artist, the dreamer, the man who was feeling a little lost in the world. When he finished the song, the final note hung in the air for a long moment before dissolving into the quiet crackle of the candle wicks. He opened his eyes and looked at me. Sorry, he said. A little depressing. No, I said, my voice thick. It was honest. He set the guitar aside and leaned back on his hands, studying my face in the wavering light. You're a terrible liar. You know that. My heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? When I first got here, you said it was fine. That my being here wasn't a problem. He shook his head slowly. But it was. It is. I've turned your whole life upside down. My life needed a little turning. I admitted, the confession slipping out before I could stop it. He fell silent, but his gaze was relentless. It felt like he was peeling back layers, trying to get to the core of me. Are you happy, Leo? He asked, his voice soft, serious. Like, really, genuinely happy. The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. No one ever asked me that. They asked how work was, if I had seen the latest movie. They never asked about the state of my soul. I'm content, I offered, the word tasting like ash. Content is what you say when you're not happy, he countered gently. It's the consolation prize. He paused, his expression turning inward. I thought I was happy. I had the good job, the decent apartment, the whole package. I was playing the part. And then I lost it all, and I realized I wasn't happy at all. I was just busy. And lonely. The word hung in the air between us. Lonely. It was a secret we shared, a hidden country where we were both citizens. Yeah, I whispered, the admission a profound relief. Me too. We sat in silence for a long time after that, but it was a different kind of silence. It was not awkward or tense. It was comfortable, companionable. It was the silence of two people who had just shown each other a small, hidden piece of themselves and found it recognized. The barrier between us, the one I had so carefully maintained for years, had developed a crack. He reached out and picked up a half-melted candle, tilting it so a drop of warm wax fell onto the back of his hand. He watched it cool and harden, his expression thoughtful. When I was a kid, he said, not looking at me, I used to think that if you were quiet enough, you could become invisible. That if you didn't make any noise or take up any space, no one could hurt you. I felt my throat tighten. Did it work? He finally looked up, his eyes seeming to glow in the candlelight. No, he said. You just end up hurting yourself. The power came back on with a sudden, jarring flicker. The refrigerator hummed to life. The digital clock on the cable box blinked 12 o'clock, and the harsh overhead light in the kitchen flooded our candlelit cave with unwelcome reality. We both blinked, momentarily blinded. The intimate, timeless space we had created was gone. Well, Julian said, his voice back to its normal, casual tone. Show's over. He stood up, stretching his back. The vulnerability of the last hour was tucked away, his easygoing mask back in place. But I knew. I had seen behind it. And I knew that he had seen behind mine. Something had been irrevocably altered in the dark. The days following the power outage were thick with an unspoken understanding. The tension was still there, but it had changed its nature. It was no longer a wire pulled taut with the possibility of snapping. It was now a low, steady hum of electricity, a current flowing just beneath the surface of our every interaction. We talked more, about things that mattered. He told me about his dream of one day opening a small gallery and studio space. I told him about my secret desire to illustrate children's books, something I had never admitted to anyone. We fell into a comfortable domestic rhythm. I would cook, he would clean. We would watch old movies on the couch, our shoulders brushing, the heat from his body a constant, comforting presence next to mine. One night, we were watching some black and white noir film. The hero was kissing the femme fatale, a dramatic, sweeping Hollywood kiss. I glanced over at Julian. He was not watching the screen. He was watching me. His expression was intense, his lips slightly parted. When he realized I had caught him, he did not look away. He just held my gaze, and the air crackled. The sound from the television faded into a meaningless buzz. The entire universe seemed to shrink to the few feet of space between us on my worn-out sofa. My heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if I leaned in, he would meet me halfway. The thought was so powerful, so paralyzing, that I could not move. I could only sit there, pinned by his gaze, my entire being screaming with a want so profound it was a physical ache. He was the one who broke the spell. He blinked slowly and gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if clearing it. He turned his attention back to the movie, his body suddenly rigid, a new wall erected where there had been an open door just a moment before. I felt a crushing wave of disappointment, followed immediately by shame. I had imagined it. I had to have imagined it. He was just being a good friend, a grateful roommate. I was the one projecting my years of pathetic pining onto every look, every touch. We watched the rest of the movie in a stiff, uncomfortable silence. When the credits rolled, he stood up immediately. I'm beat, he said, not looking at me. Gonna turn in. Okay, I said to his retreating back. Good night. He paused at the edge of the living room, his hand on the back of the couch. Leo, he said, his voice low. He still did not turn around. Yeah. Good night, he repeated, softer this time. And then he was gone, settled into his sleeping bag on the floor, his back to me. Sleep did not come easily that night. I replayed the moment on the couch 1,000 times, dissecting it from every angle. The intensity in his eyes, was it desire, or was I just a convenient screen for his own loneliness? His retreat, was it rejection, or was he fighting the same battle I was? The not knowing was worse than anything. The next day was a Saturday. I woke up late to the smell of coffee and bacon. It was a jarringly domestic scent. I walked into the kitchen to find Julian at the stove, a spatula in his hand, his hair a mess from sleep. He was wearing an old, faded band t-shirt and a pair of gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips. He looked rumpled and soft, and so painfully attractive that I had to grip the doorframe for support. "Morning," he said, his tone carefully neutral. He gestured to the table with his spatula. "I made breakfast. As a thank you. For, everything. You didn't have to do that," I said, my voice husky with sleep. I know. He scooped scrambled eggs onto 2 plates, his movements efficient and practiced. We ate in a silence that felt heavy and deliberate. The air was thick with the ghost of last night, with the questions that had been asked and left unanswered in the space between our eyes. "I got a call yesterday," he said, pushing his eggs around his plate. "A promising lead. A firm downtown is looking for a project manager. It's a long shot, but the interview is on Monday." My stomach dropped. This was it. This was the beginning of the end. He would get a job, find an apartment, and move out. My life would go back to its quiet, orderly state. The silence would return, but it would no longer be comfortable. It would be a gaping, Julian-shaped void. The thought was unbearable. That's great," I said, the words feeling like a lie. "That's amazing news." "Yeah," he said, without conviction. He looked up and met my eyes. "It would mean I could finally get out of your hair." "You're not in my hair," I said, more forcefully than I intended. A faint smile touched his lips. "Liar," he said softly. We finished our breakfast, and the day stretched out before us, a landscape of unspoken tension. He went out for a run. I stayed in and tried to work, but the pickle logo just stared back at me, a mocking green swirl. I could not focus. My mind was a hamster wheel of anxiety and longing. When he came back, flushed and sweaty from his run, he stripped his shirt off right there in the living room, using it to wipe his face. My eyes were involuntarily drawn to the lean, hard muscles of his chest and stomach, glistening with a light sheen of sweat. I saw the bandage on his forearm, the one I had put there. He caught me looking. I quickly averted my gaze, my face burning. "I'm gonna grab a shower," he said, and disappeared into the bathroom. I sat on the couch, my head in my hands. This could not go on. The proximity, the constant dance of advance and retreat, was shredding my nerves. I was living on a knife's edge of hope and fear, and it was exhausting. Something had to break. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the apartment. I heard Julian shifting in his sleeping bag, a restless sound. Was he awake too? Was he thinking about the look we had shared? About the job interview? About leaving? My mind spun, weaving elaborate fantasies and crushing anxieties in equal measure. I imagined him getting the job, imagined helping him move into a new place, imagined shaking his hand at the door and saying, "See you around, man," while my heart shattered into a million pieces. Then I imagined him not getting the job, imagined him staying for another month, another 2, the sweet torture stretching on indefinitely. I did not know which scenario was worse. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a floorboard creak in the living room. Then another, closer. My breath caught in my throat. I lay perfectly still, my ears straining in the darkness. I heard the soft sound of my bedroom door easing open. My heart began to pound, a frantic, heavy drum against my ribs. I did not move. I did not breathe. I could feel his presence in the room, a dark shape against the faint moonlight filtering through the window. He stood there for a long moment, just inside the doorway, as if waiting. Then, he moved slowly, silently, toward my bed. This is it. My mind is a blank slate, a white screen of pure, unadulterated panic and anticipation. He stops at the side of the bed. I can feel the heat coming off his body. I can smell the clean, soapy scent of him, mingling with something else, something uniquely Julian. It's the smell of turpentine and late nights and restless energy. He's just standing there, watching me. I keep my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep, my body rigid under the thin sheet. Is this a dream? It must be a dream. A particularly vivid, torturous creation of my sleep-deprived brain. Then, the mattress dips. The shift in weight is so slight, but it feels like a seismic event. He's kneeling on the edge of the bed. My entire nervous system is on fire. Every cell is screaming. He's so close. So close. His hand, warm and calloused, touches my shoulder. It's a feather-light touch, tentative, questioning. I don't flinch. I can't. I'm paralyzed. He takes my stillness as permission. His fingers trail down my arm, over my bicep, leaving a scorching path on my skin. He's tracing the lines of me in the dark. His other hand comes to rest on my hip, his thumb stroking the bone through the thin cotton of my pajama pants. The gentle, repetitive motion is both soothing and electrifying. My breath is trapped in my lungs, a painful, burning pressure. Then he leans down. I feel his breath, warm and soft, against my ear. It tickles, sending a shiver down my spine. He doesn't say anything. He just breathes. And then his lips, impossibly soft, touch the side of my neck. It's not a kiss. Not yet. It's a press. A statement. A question asked without words. My mind is screaming, a chaotic chorus of yes, finally, please, don't stop. And what are you doing? What does this mean? Is this real? He seems to take my continued silence as his answer. His lips begin to move, tracing a slow, deliberate path from my neck up to my jaw. Each touch is a revelation. It's gentle. It's reverent. It's nothing like the desperate, fumbling encounters I have imagined in my loneliest moments. This is something else entirely. He kisses the corner of my mouth, a soft, lingering touch. He's waiting. He's giving me an out. I could turn my head. I could push him away. I could say his name in a warning tone. I could end this right now and go back to my safe, miserable life. I don't. I turn my head slightly, meeting his lips with my own. The kiss is devastating. It's soft and deep and full of a desperate, unspoken longing that mirrors my own. It's a kiss that tastes of 5 years of silence, of stolen glances and accidental touches, of fear and hope and loneliness. It's the most honest conversation we have ever had. He pulls back just enough to breathe, his forehead resting against mine. I can feel the frantic beat of his heart, or maybe it's my own. In the darkness, we are just two heartbeats, two sets of lungs drawing the same charged air. His hands begin to move again, bolder now. One hand slides under my shirt, his palm flat against the bare skin of my stomach. His touch is electric. I gasp, the sound swallowed by the darkness. His other hand travels down my side, over my hip, to my thigh. He breaks the kiss and his lips travel lower, down my jaw, my throat, to the hollow of my collarbone. He lingers there, his mouth warm against my skin. My hands, which have been lying useless at my sides, finally come to life. I tangle my fingers in his hair. It's thick and soft. I grip it tightly, anchoring myself to this moment, to the reality of him. His mouth continues its slow, exquisite exploration, down my chest, over my ribs. He kisses the spot right over my heart, and a choked sob escapes my lips. It's too much. It's everything I have ever wanted. His hand on my thigh slides higher, his touch firm, confident. He is mapping my body, learning its landscape. He finds the waistband of my pajama pants, his fingers hesitating there for a fraction of a second. Another question. My hips lift from the mattress, an involuntary, desperate motion. An answer. His lips move lower still, over my stomach. The rasp of his stubble against my skin is an incredible friction. Every nerve ending is alive, screaming for more. He is so close to the aching center of my need. My entire body is a bowstring pulled taut, vibrating with a tension that is almost painful. He stops. His mouth is just above the line of my waistband, his breath hot against my skin. He is torturing me. He knows exactly what he is doing. My voice, when I find it, is a raw, unrecognizable rasp. A single, desperate command torn from the deepest part of me. Lower. The word hangs in the air, a final, complete surrender. A plea. An invitation. He answers me not with words, but with a deep, shuddering breath. And then he does. I awoke to the gray light of dawn filtering through my window and the unnerving realization that I was alone. The other side of the bed was cold. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I had dreamed it all, that the entire night had been a cruel fantasy spun from my own desperate longing. But then I saw it, the indentation on the pillow next to mine, and I could still smell him on my sheets, a faint, lingering scent of soap and skin. It was real. A wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. He had left. He had crept back to his own corner of the apartment, leaving me alone in the aftermath. Regret. The word slammed into my chest. He regretted it. He had been drunk, or lonely, or confused, and in the clear light of day, he was horrified by what he had done. I lay there, paralyzed by a familiar, soul-crushing dread. I had finally been given the one thing I wanted most in the world, only to have it snatched away. I had been a fool to think it could be real, a fool to say that word, to surrender so completely. The apartment was silent. Too silent. I could not hear him moving around. Had he left? Had he packed his few belongings and just gone? The thought was so terrifying that it propelled me out of bed. I pulled on a t-shirt and stepped out of my room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The living room was empty. His sleeping bag was rolled up neatly in the corner. His laptop was gone from the coffee table. My stomach plummeted. He was gone. Then I heard it. A soft clink from the kitchen. I moved toward the sound on shaky legs, my mind bracing for the worst. A note on the counter, a stilted, awkward apology. I peeked around the corner. Julian was there, his back to me. He was standing at the counter, carefully pouring hot water into 2 mugs. He was fully dressed in jeans and a Henley, his hair still damp. He had not run away. He was making coffee. The sheer domesticity of the act was so jarring, so at odds with the frantic chaos in my head, that I just stood there, unable to speak. He must have sensed my presence, because he turned around slowly. His face was unreadable. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but there was no horror there. No disgust. Just a quiet, watchful intensity. He held my gaze for a long moment, the silence stretching between us, thick with the memory of the night. I opened my mouth to say something. I don't know what. An apology? A question? But no words came out. My throat was tight with fear. He broke the silence. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice low and a little rough. I just nodded, unable to trust my own voice. He picked up one of the mugs and walked toward me. He did not stop a few feet away, at a safe, friendly distance. He came right up to me, so close that I had to tilt my head back to look at him. He held the mug out, and I took it, my fingers brushing against his. The brief touch was a spark in the cold landscape of my anxiety. He did not retreat. He just stood there, looking down at me, his eyes searching my face. "Leo," he said, his voice so quiet I could barely hear it. "I don't regret last night." The words were a lifeline. The tension in my chest eased, just a little. "Not a second of it," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "But I need to know. Do you?" I looked down into my mug, at the steam rising from the black coffee. I thought about the years of silence, the aching loneliness, the fortress I had built around my heart. And then I thought about his hands on my skin, his mouth on mine, the incredible, earth-shattering relief of finally being touched, of finally being seen. "No," I whispered, looking back up at him. "Not a second of it." A slow smile spread across his face. It was not his cocky grin. It was something softer, more genuine. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. He reached out and gently took the mug from my hand, placing it on the counter beside mine. Then he cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. His hands were so warm. "Good," he breathed, and then he leaned down and kissed me. This kiss was different from the ones in the dark. It was not desperate or exploratory. It was a kiss of confirmation. It was slow and sure and tasted of coffee and a new beginning. It was a promise. When he pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed. "I have been wanting to do that," he murmured, "for a very, very long time." "Me too," I confessed, the words finally escaping. "Since college." He let out a soft, shaky laugh against my skin. "You hide it well," he said. "I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was imagining things." "You weren't," I said, a giddy, unfamiliar joy bubbling up inside me. "You weren't imagining any of it." We stood there in the kitchen for a long time, just holding each other, the 2 mugs of coffee growing cold on the counter. The silence returned, but it was the best kind of silence. It was full and warm and comfortable, the silence of 2 people who had finally found their way home. The interview was still on Monday. The prospect of him getting the job and moving out no longer felt like a threat, but a test, a hurdle we would have to navigate. We spent the rest of the weekend in a bubble of discovery. We talked for hours, filling in the silent years, confessing the near misses and misunderstood signals. We learned that we had both been pining from afar, each too scared of rejection, too convinced of the other's indifference, to ever make a move. It was both tragic and absurdly, wonderfully funny. We also touched. A lot. It was as if a dam had broken, and now we could not get enough. His hand would find mine as we sat on the couch. My hand would rest on his knee. He would wrap his arms around me from behind while I was washing dishes, resting his chin on my shoulder. Each touch was simple, chaste, and yet it felt more intimate than anything I had ever known. We were relearning how to exist in the same space, not as roommates, but as something new, something undefined and precious. On Monday morning, I helped him pick out a tie. He stood in front of my bedroom mirror, looking impossibly handsome and professional in a button-down shirt and slacks. I stood behind him, my hands on his shoulders, and met his eyes in the reflection. The anxiety was back, a low thrum beneath the surface. "What if I get it?" he asked, his voice quiet, betraying his own fear. "Then you get it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And we'll figure it out." He turned around, taking my hands in his. "I don't want to figure it out from a different apartment, Leo." My heart swelled. "Then don't," I said simply. "Stay." His eyes widened slightly. "Here? With you?" "It's a small apartment," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "But we could get a bigger bed." He laughed, a full, joyous sound that filled the room. He pulled me against him and kissed me deeply. "I'll take the job," he said against my lips, "on one condition." "What's that?" "That I come home to you every night." He got the job. The transition was not seamless. There were moments of awkwardness, of reverting to old roommate habits. There were moments of fear, the quiet, insidious voice in the back of my mind whispering that this was too good to be true, that it could not possibly last. But every time the fear crept in, Julian would do something to banish it. He would take my hand, or look at me with such open, honest affection that it left no room for doubt. A month later, we were in a furniture store, arguing playfully over bed frames. He wanted a rustic, solid wood frame. I wanted something more modern and minimalist. It was a stupid, trivial argument, but it was also the most wonderful argument I had ever had, because it was an argument about our bed, about our future. We settled on a compromise, a simple black metal frame that was both modern and sturdy. As we stood at the checkout counter, he slid his arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Happy," he murmured in my ear. I leaned my head against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. I thought about the silent, empty apartment that I used to call home. I thought about the lonely, content lie I had told myself for years. And I looked at this man beside me, this beautiful, unexpected hurricane who had torn through my Zen garden and planted something new and vibrant and real in its place. "Yeah," I said, my voice filled with a quiet, profound certainty. "I'm happy." The silence in our apartment had a new texture now. It was not the smooth, worn silence of loneliness. It was a warm, comfortable quiet, filled with the soft sound of two people breathing in the same room, the gentle rustle of pages turning, the low hum of a shared life. It was the sound of peace, the real kind, the kind you don't have to lie to yourself about. It was the sound of coming home.